Well, I work with biodiversity conservation specifically. Biodiversity, of course, is the total genetic heritage of what's around us, plants, animals, other kingdoms. Anyway, all life and all genetic material makes up our biodiversity. And so within my work life, my division is responsible for the inventory of the biodiversity of Virginia and its protection. So it's a very broad mission, and though we're not regulatory, we have a lot of conservation tools that we can bring to bear in order to protect biodiversity. And in my private life, I talk to people about this, and I also own 10 acres and do a lot to protect the native biodiversity of the land that I live on. Yeah, so I have 10 forested acres of western Hanover County, about 30 minutes west of Richmond, sort of in that empty space between Richmond and Charlottesville. If you ever drive down I-64, there's a lot of nothing there. And so I have 10 acres, and I use a lot of different management tools. I burn some of my land to emulate what used to happen on the landscape throughout Virginia, and a lot of plants and animals are adapted to a burned landscape in Virginia. So I do some burning, I open up the canopy, keep the understory thinned out to make room for the herbs, and I also control invasive species that are at my house. So I have 10 acres of native vegetation that is well managed, and I have a lot of biodiversity associated with that. So there's something called the Virginia Natural Area Preserves Act of 1989. And what that did was it established our division and our program, Natural Heritage Program, but it also established the state's capability to take on natural area preserves. And since 1989, we've gathered 63 natural area preserves scattered throughout the state, which are managed for their biodiversity into perpetuity. And these 63 areas actually comprise 56,300 acres, and many of them are open to the public for visitation. So there are many natural area preserves that people can visit and really check out the biodiversity. And we have a whole staff through the Act that is dedicated to manage these preserves for their biodiversity. Well, as you might imagine, I love my job. It's a lot of fun, but I would think that I'm most thankful that I really do think that we've made a difference on the local scale for protection of biodiversity. Now, there are large global threats, particularly climate change, and to somewhat of a lesser extent, the widespread movement of species around the planet, so invasive species. Those two issues are bigger than what we can do. But there's a lot we can do on the local scale to catalog what plants and animals we have in Virginia and to protect them with natural area preserves and other protection instruments we have. So I would think that the thing that makes me the most happy is to know that I've made a difference in terms of what biodiversity out there we've protected and the quantity of biodiversity we've been able to protect.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever anybody that's in college or coming out of college or is in grad school communicates with me and says, hey, I want to know more about, or I'm interested in what you do and I want to do more, I always invite those people to come down because I think it's very important that we get young folks interested in this topic and willing to work at it and passionate about it. But in thinking about that question, I thought of this scenario. What I would suggest to anybody is first, take a walk outside, and where are you drawn to?
So we chose Chris Ludwig because of his work with conservation and biodiversity, which are two topics that are central to both of our papers this semester.
So my paper topic is on insect conservation, and Chris has 10 acres of land that he conserves, and over the many years he has researched the native Lepidoptera in Virginia.
And that same land that Elizabeth was talking about is super interesting to me because he protects it from deforestation and protects the local biodiversity from the effects of deforestation, which is what my paper this semester is about in the Amazon.
So our biggest takeaway from Chris Ludwig is that conservation is not a 9-to-5 job, it's a lifestyle. He goes to work and he conserves, and then he comes home and he works on his own 10 acres of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.